The New Orleans Saints, fellas, have made a trade, a pretty important one for the Denver Broncos, allowing them to hire Sean Payton, the Super Bowl winning future Hall of Fame head coach. And in return, the Broncos will be getting a third-round pick from 2024 with his services. The Saints will be getting a 2023 first and a 2024 second. And to simplify that, the first-round pick they got for Bradley Chubb, that looks like a pretty good deal now. That was paired alongside a second for for Sean Payton. I'm mixing up his name with George Patton, his new fella, and a third-round pick. Brandon, when you looked at Russell Wilson this last season and everything that went on with Nathaniel Hackett, can Sean Payton turn around the Denver Broncos? And with this current roster, what can we expect from the Broncos going into next season? What is the realistic expectation?
Well, first off, you answered a question that I was going to have was that because when this trade happened or whatever, I remembered I was like I saw a first round pick for 2023, and I remembered, wait, the Broncos just made a massive trade with the Seattle Seahawks, and I know they gave away their first round pick, and then you just jogged my memory. They traded away Bradley Chubb and got a first round pick from the Dolphins, so that was this first round pick. So they've had a lot of first round picks, giving a lot of them away. So they're going all in. And as for your question about can Sean Payton fix Russell Wilson, I've been pretty negative. I've been pretty much saying like if I was Jim Harbaugh or Sean Payton that I would stay away. Like this is one of the worst free agent classes for head coaches, if you want to say. I don't like really any of the teams since the Cowboys and the Chargers basically locked up and said no, McCarthy and Staley are staying. But we're here. Sean Payton is the head coach. I saw a report, I guess from I forget, I think it was Rappaport, um, Ian Rappaport, that said like I guess their first choice was D'Amico Ryans, or and then D'Amico said no, I'm going to Texans. Then they wanted to quietly try and get Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh said no, and then they went with Sean Payton, I guess. I don't know if that's true. Um, but again, that's like their fourth option, if that is true. That's all hearsay. But as now, Sean Payton being the head coach for the Denver Broncos, can he fix Russell Wilson? I'm gonna give Russell a little bit of a pass for last season. Then I'm not gonna be as harsh as I was before. I'm not gonna let last season fool me. I think it was a mixture of injuries, uh, a
New
new
scheme.
place, new team, new coaching staff, Nathaniel Hackett not being a head coach material, an offensive scheme that maybe didn't mix with him, or maybe him having too much power and calling way too many of his own plays, because we know that controversy with the Pete Carroll. Whatever the case may be, you got Sean Payton now, and Sean Payton has proven to be an offensive genius. Him and Drew Brees, their history is well documented, how many records they broke, offensive yards. Uh, it's insane. So can Russell get back to that? I think that he can. I'm going to put my faith in Russell Wilson. I'm going to put my faith in Sean Payton, who's a Super Bowl head coach. And I think if Jerry Jeudy is healthy, which he hasn't really been the last couple of seasons, Cortland Sutton is healthy. Tim Patrick comes back from his torn ACL, whatever he's going to be able to be next year.
Javante
That tight end
Williams.
that you like, John, I forgot his name, Udrick,
Greg
the tight
Dulcich.
end for Dulich, there you go. Yeah, and Javante Williams, who went down early in the season, they can get those guys back. We know what the defense can give you. The defense is elite. It's great in pass coverage. But that offense just needs its work, and I think Sean Payton's going to work some magic. I don't know. I would imagine their cap flexibility is not very kind. Their draft capital is obviously not very good because of all these moves that they've made. So they're kind of strapped, I guess. They would be stuck right now in their position of the team that they can go ahead and go forward with. Maybe they can make a couple of veteran ads here and there, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm going to put my faith in them, though.
You know what a difference a head coach can make. Going into the season, we all had high hopes for the Broncos. You know, just acquiring Russ thought that this roster was possibly a quarterback away from being a contender at least. And they showed some at least games against Kansas City where I think it was one game against Kansas City where things were pretty tight, and they played
Well,
some
both,
close.
both Justin,
Both it was both games,
both
yeah.
games were
So
tight. Yeah.
they played them pretty tight, and when you're playing in that division, the AFC West, it's you're playing to beat Kansas City. It's not about everybody else. It's playing to beat Kansas City, and once you show that you can do that, then you could possibly take that next step. And it just seemed like while we thought this team was a quarterback away, we didn't realize that the head coach that they hired was not exactly ready for the job. And I'm not trying to hammer on Nathaniel Hackett, but some people just aren't ready for it. And plus, I guess they just didn't have that chemistry in the locker room. Things just weren't fixed up. There was a lot of stories coming out of Denver just about Russell Wilson alone, and it was just off. And Russell Wilson, the Russ that we saw in Seattle, was an MVP candidate, putting up numbers, can lead a team, and we kind of lost that, and it made me question: is Russ broken? What happened this year? And I guess you're right, Brandon. You probably are that a lot of things just went wrong. The new scheme, new coach, new city. When you go into, he played. How long was he in Seattle? Over at least a decade, right?
10 years.
Yeah, 10 years in Seattle, and then you go to a new spot. Sometimes, the grass isn't always greener on the other side, but when you add in a coach like Sean Payton and all the things that he's done, all the things that he's established and accomplished in his career, that's the perfect coach to help turn around your franchise. A franchise that since Peyton Manning has left has been looking for that head coach, looking for that quarterback to guide them. And I think they found their guy. I think Russ wanted him too. So I think teams like Arizona completely whiffed at a big opportunity to possibly change the course of your franchise. But this is a big win for Denver. No matter what they had to give up to get him, this is a head coach that, if he's all in, which I'm more than positive that he is, can make an instant impact and can catapult your team to it's one of those worst to first kind of stories. Not saying they will be first, but they'll definitely have the capability to do so.
This was an A plus by the Denver Broncos. And, to answer the Russell Wilson question and the fall off from his years in Seattle, it's quite straightforward. Nathaniel Hackett couldn't redesign his offense to support Russ properly. Russ is not someone that sees the middle of the field well. It's something we've talked about a little bit with Kyler Murray. When you have a specific quarterback that is limited, you need to cater to their strengths. And in Denver, I felt like Nathaniel Hackett as a play caller wasn't even that bad, but we all knew Hackett was not hired to coach Russell Wilson. It was another Hall of Fame quarterback. Well, maybe we'll see with Russ. This is exactly what you need to get him back on track. Somebody that in New Orleans with Jameis Winston had that team in the playoff mix up until the end of the season, with Winston tearing his ACL, with no weapons in 2021. Payton was top 5, top 7 coach, and there's no two ways about it. To Britain, one of the very best quarterback heroes in NFL history, to go alongside Javonte Williams, who was supposed to be one of their 2 biggest weapons last year. You hope with Javonte, by the second half of the season, you'll see him come on the same way we did with Cam Akers. But it's tough to know because oftentimes with these running backs, they need 2 years. So that's my biggest concern. But when talking about the supporting cast, it's good enough. There's no glaring hole. You get Garrett Bowles back, who was starting the second half of the season. All things considered, this is the ultimate put up or shut up time for Russell Wilson, because you have the head coach in a division where whoever the Raiders quarterback next year and Justin Herbert, they won't really be able to say the same. You have a top 5 defense. You have a decent offensive line. It's not above average, but it's competent. And you have, when healthy, some of the better weapons in football. If you're between D'Amico Ryans, the defensive coordinator, who may or may not get the right play caller, Jim Harbaugh, who probably wasn't even that interested in the first place, or Sean Payton, this was the perfect way to go. And yeah, I'm giving this an A+. What would you guys grade it? Because maybe I'm looking at this with the rose-colored glasses.
No, I mean, no, I think, yeah, A+. I agree. I don't think you are, because I think you go get a Super Bowl head coach. Like everything everybody said basically is this is supposed to be a culture changing move. So the Broncos' expectations next year should be Super Bowls. Should be the Super Bowl, I should say. Or I mean Super Bowls, because you got years. You got Sean Payton on signed on for years. You got Russell signed on for that massive contract. So let's go. Or as the Broncos fans say, or not fans, Russell Wilson says, let's ride.
That's right. Yeah, Broncos country should be excited for this. So yeah, it's a clean sweep when with the A pluses here. Like Brandon said, this is a complete culture change for Denver. This is something completely new. A coach that has full control of the roster. He's not butting heads with anybody upstairs. This is his team, and he's gonna run it how he sees fit. Brandon was right. You said it earlier in the season. Your concerns about the Saints with Dennis Allen as their head coach, transitioning from Payton to another one, and it clearly showed. So nobody ever questioned how good Sean Payton was as a head coach, and we all know what he did with the Saints. So I wouldn't be surprised if, like you said, this team should be contending next year. No excuse now. You got the head coach. You got a full offseason of work. Like you said, Broncos country, it's time to ride.
You want to know what could also be riding in Denver? Vic Fangio. It was reported Vic will be going to Miami, which sounded pretty good for the Dolphins. And now it's seeming like, pen hasn't been put to paper yet. And Vic Fangio could perhaps, while he has been rumored to sign with the Dolphins, could be talking with the Broncos. Would he be willing to go back to Denver? I'm not quite sure, but one thing I do know is that Vic Fangio probably would rather be a defensive coordinator and would enjoy going back to that team with a new coaching staff, new ownership, and one of the youngest defenses that is quickly rising. Justin Simmons, Patrick Surtain, the secondary is special. It's the perfect group, I think, for his defense to shine.
I mean, as a Patriots fan, I'd like him to go to the AFC West. Just a suggestion.
I don't blame you.
Values, my suggestion. Just go ahead. Go with Sean Payton. It's fine.
I mean, the only thing from taking fandom out of it, Vic Fangio to Miami was a home run. That was a home run hit for them, especially from Mike McDaniel, just focusing solely on the offense, having another head coach of the defense really out there. So if they really miss out on that, and he ends up finding his way to Denver, Miami's going to be in a little bit of a pickle because they thought they had something secured.
I think it's a matter of who's willing to put more money on the table, J-Ray. And whoever, between the two ownership groups, pays more, my bet would probably be on the Broncos when they make a move getting Sean Payton. I mean, you give up a first-round pick, but you get an elite offensive mind, a top-5 coach, and perhaps one of the very best defensive coordinators. That, to me, is worth 2 or 3 first-round picks. We talked about it with the Chargers. You can have a really good roster. The Broncos roster is not on the level of the Chargers, but it doesn't have any holes, per se. So to get the coaches next year, the expectation is not only the playoffs, it's 12 wins, in my eyes. But we'll really have to see what Javonte looks like, because that, to me, is probably the biggest weapon in that offense.
And you have to hit on those late round picks that you still do have. That's where you have to be special, because that's where the Rams weren't as special with the F them picks mentality. It's kind of what the Broncos are doing too. So you have to hit on those late round picks, those culture guys that you can keep.